How can I, as a director, use my intuition to further my creative voice? Something I have learnt to appreciate is realising that the art of filmmaking is a process. In the case of many art forms, it's only through a lot of practice do you further yourself in your craft. Filmmaking is no different, with the role of a director being seen as the author, painter, sculptor or composer of a film since the term of the auteur came about in 1954. However, where does one start when trying to figure out how to conduct themselves in the same form? Looking on my journey so far, going from a lifetime film lover to making my own films, I want to acknowledge the work I've done whilst putting new techniques through research into practice, with the results helping me further myself as a filmmaker and artist in the future. It should come as no surprise to me that this is the research I want to pursue. Coming on to the MA course at University of Salford, I know I want to pursue directing after finding a love for it at the end of my BA at Liverpool John Moores University. However, even when I was studying film studies at A-level, I started to dip my toes into the world of cinema by studying directors' bodies of work. Of course, these are all typical Western modern directors such as Quentin Tarantino, Wes Anderson and Stanley Kubrick. However, I was starting to discover the craft of a director, something I was curious with since I figured out at a young age that the films Moonrise Kingdom and Fantastic Mr. Fox look very similar. Therefore, as stated, I have been fascinated with the craft from a young age, and another director I discovered on this journey was David Lynch, when I watched a lot of his work during my BA. This was a turning point for me, seeing that films can be made with your own unique voice and vision. Furthermore, when Lynch passed in January 2025, my friend gifted me his book, Room to Dream. Reading this made me truly understand Lynch's creative methodology and approach to art. At the time of reading, I was taking a gap year after feeling burnt out after my BA, and felt almost enlightened after reading about Lynch's life, which makes sense why it's such a big part of my research, as I will go on to explain. Lynch is widely known for his intuitive approach to filmmaking, which he credits mostly to his practice of transcendental meditation, believing that the human subconscious is the key to understanding personal and artistic freedoms. Therefore, his approach to ideas is so refreshing, stating that
we don't really create an idea, we just catch them, like fish. No chef ever takes credit for making the fish. It's just preparing the fish. So you get an idea, and it is like a seed. And in your mind, the idea is seen and felt, and it explodes like it's got electricity and light connected to it, and it has all the images and the feeling, and it's like in an instant you know the idea.
which also mirrors other filmmakers such as Bresson's approach. Be as ignorant of what you are going to catch as is a fisherman of what is at the end of his fishing rod, the fish that arises from nowhere. Treating ideas as something we can't fully explain, as they are something that just conjure from within us. The famous filmography and imagery from Lynch are well known, as he was an artist who always held onto his own unique vision, and when he would bend the studio demands, as seen as adaptation of Dune, he knew he wasn't sticking to his own intuition, and the film suffered because of that, believing he died twice, one time to the audience criticisms, and one time to his own passions, as he didn't believe in the work he'd done. Lynch's approach is what makes his films such as Eraserhead and Mulholland Drive so special, as Lynch refuses mechanisms that have been recycled. It's an idea of letting go to avoid cliché. Lynch works on instincts to go through the barrier of the dreaming mind. I'm not claiming I'm Lynch in some reincarnated form, nor do I want to copy his style. However, I do want to explore that idea of intuition in his process, and testing if it's the key to explore my creative voice. As the uniqueness of our unconscious minds, that are filled with ungotten information, spontaneous associations, deep connections, could be the source of intuition, and the raw materials of our creative imaginations. There's something so important and personal about directing on intuition that links to ideas going beyond the practicalities of filmmaking. It's something so unique that can't be expressed in words, with the language of cinema as an audio-visual form being a key tool to allow artists to express themselves. Starting on the screenplay within the Establishing Practices module proved to be exciting for me, as you learn within the 4 weeks to trust our own creative voices, which plays into the idea of intuition when creating a story. I was split between two minds when writing my screenplay, with one grappling with trying to create an engaging original idea that had fleshed out themes and characters and a world, whilst also being worried the page number limit, time to write and the potential production restrictions. I've always struggled to write films that are these contained, simple, yet effective ideas, with my stories always becoming a little larger than life. A prime example here being that I wrote a film about vampires harvesting blood from pensioners. It's safe to say mine wasn't chosen to be made the next block of the module, and understandably so. Yet the practice of this time started to unlock this inherent internal trust I needed to explore my own creative voice, by trusting the story I wanted to tell whilst adhering to the restrictions. It taught me a lot about writing, but also about the process of expressing our ideas, as writing should provide an insight into the human condition. The central theme doesn't have to be original, as it really will be, but it's the writer's unique perspective of life that brings something new, as well as making sure that everything is driven by the story, so that individual ideas will be connected to the central idea of the story. A hard feat to pull off, especially at student level, yet that unlocking of understanding has created this new perspective for me going forward. With the chance the screenplay could be made in the following block, I did start to envision the film as I was writing it, with key visuals and ideas of directing the actors coming to mind. However, in reflection, I see this may be a flaw of mine in the writing process, as directing the film and the screenplay will make the writer-director wedded to the short-sighted directorial choices embedded in the script, overlooking the many opportunities to improve the project during the various stages of production and benefit from the creative collaborators around them. Even though I was trusting my intuition within my story, I was lacking an insight to communicate my ideas effectively by getting ahead of myself in the writing process itself, something I will keep in mind when going to write in the future. Furthermore, it was interesting to see how this process was effective on the rest of the class too. With everyone trusting their creative intuition through guidance, it was clear to see the progression in story through each student's drafts and reworks through the block. When moving on to directing in the established practices block, I faced a lot of challenges, especially when trying to apply certain methods to my practice. Starting off, I found it difficult directing someone else's screenplay and working in direct correlation to the writer, who also acted as cinematographer, as this often led to disagreements between the vision on paper and how I would translate that to screen, as the screenwriter handing a script to a director must leave the room for other creative talents on the crew to do their jobs, to allow the film to elevate from the bones of a film within the screenplay.
Working relationship with Martin Scorsese? Well, I just finished another script for Marty. It's my third one, and it's very, very clean, which is that we meet, I write a script, he reads it, we meet again. I polish the script, I hand it in. I disappear. That's what the working relationship is. After I hand it in, I'm gone. I don't call, I don't ask. He makes the movie. I've done my job. If the script is really good, it will inspire him to be better.
It's natural this type of conflict arises, but I've learned to keep these roles separate in the future for benefit of the story you're trying to tell. Even though I had experience directing someone else's screenplay on my BA, I was involved in the story process there, which may have created more trust then than when it came to translating the story here. Furthermore, I did a lot of prep before shooting, such as script edits, shot lists, set design, mood boards, and filmic references. Yet I knew that even with that, things would really come together on the day of shooting. I went in with ideas to try things in a moment, and to trust that directorial intuition to help create a sense of urgency within the film. In my head, the spontaneity of this would come through in performance, as it's crucial for directors to have intuition when working with actors, as actors are operating below the social mask. They are in the moment, which means that their emotional territory is primarily subconscious, where the director needs to meet with them to pull an effective performance. This did prove to be successful in some ways, as working with our actor Stewie, it meant I could build up a rapport with him, making him feel comfortable, which allowed him to take risks when I asked him to improvise, elevating the script and playing up the believability.
And Melancholia.
Melancholia.
I remember the first day on Melancholia, we shot a scene, Kirsten Dunst and I, in the limo on our way to our wedding. And Lars was like, all right, at some point, you know, Alex, you're talking to the driver, trying to help navigate this curve. You're stuck. And at some point, you get out of the car. And I asked him, like, well, do you want me to step out this side or that side of the car? Thinking that conventional filmmaking, they would have a plan for like a wide shot, and it looks better if you come out this way because otherwise you're blocked by the car. And I'll never forget his look, because he's just like, I don't know. Whatever you feel like, we'll follow you. And that kind of summed up his style of filmmaking. It was so liberating, like just to run around. And like you said, he didn't care about continuity really or hitting your marks. He was just following, even in big crowd scenes, wherever he felt the energy was, what interested him in the moment, he would just run with the camera and discover it. And it was just so exhilarating, wasn't it?
However, with time being our biggest enemy on the day, it made this approach difficult. I had to AD as well as direct, which meant juggling between managing the set regarding cast, crew, and time, whilst making creative decisions. The balance was uneven, and I'd argue it shows within the film. There are mistakes, and there could have been more time dedicated to capturing performance and trying things out with the camera that would create a more dynamic film. Therefore, I couldn't tap into the spontaneous approach to filmmaking I would have liked to. I learned that maybe in this approach I was being too ambitious too early, forgetting that to make this film successful I must remember that I'm working with a team. Not to say I was ignorant to this, and I'd like to think I was very fair, working with the cast and crew, yet I maybe should have planned or communicated my approach more, making it clear what I wanted to each person, so everyone was on the same page. As I want to be someone with strong ideas who also creates an atmosphere of artistic excitement, mutual respect and hard work, for my fellow filmmakers and actors to feel comfortable on set, whilst also wanting to work together again. This shows that my ambition to achieve this approach is still very much in its early days, and it's something I'll have to practice mastering. On another note, I don't believe I needed the film to be my own idea and screenplay for this to have worked better, as historically there are many famous directors that don't write their own films, and primarily focus upon that translation. A lot of that coming down to the art of writing and directing being two different forms of expression. Going back to that earlier idea of not directing the screenplay as you write it, like Weston argues. With something like Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer screenplay being written in the first person without any screen directions or descriptions, as a lot of those things are primarily in Nolan's vision that come afterwards and feeding into this rhythmic psyche Nolan achieves in the translation of his own script. Yet other films such as Taxi Driver, where Scorsese struck up a long-term collaboration with writer Paul Schrader, prove you don't need to be the person who created the idea to translate it to screen successfully. Without putting the film down, I don't believe this was a piece that showed my creative voice truly. There are aspects in there I'd like, and you can see the direction I wanted to go with, yet it falls flat. Through this process I learned that my next project needed a change in its construction. Putting my research and approach into practice with the innovative project proved in some interesting results. Here I approached the film strictly on intuition. I went into shooting without a script, shot list, or even an actor. I knew how I wanted the film to look and how I wanted to capture a very particular and comfortable feeling. This is something many filmmakers have done, but I want to point towards Lynch's last feature film, Inland Empire, which was made by Lynch having an idea, writing it down, and then immediately going to film it.
Normally, you write a script, and a script is based on ideas if it's an original script. And so you try to catch ideas, and if the whole thing doesn't unravel in one idea, you get fragments. And then when you get a fragment of an idea, you write it down. And then you get another idea and you write it down, and hopefully one day you have a finished script. On this particular film, I would get an idea, write it down, and then go shoot it. And so I didn't know if a whole thing would emerge. I didn't know how this scene, then I get another idea, write that and shoot that, and I don't know how one relates to the other. But it didn't really bother me. I just kept doing that until one time it kind of started unfolding how they all related. The same process is in a script, but now the pieces have been shot up to that point.
Even though I wasn't writing a script, I took what I learned on the course so far and made something on instinct like Lynch's process. The only prep I did was organising the shoot myself, making a very loose shot list, functioning as more of a checklist, and makeup sound tests. The latter also coming from intuition. I was testing the makeup for my skin and thought to record the process for this video essay. You could argue this goes against my intuitive approach, yet it was the imagery alongside testing the materials for Foley that helped solidify the effectiveness and reality of the idea before I went to shoot. That it still came from simply testing ideas and finding out results in the moment, reinforcing the effectiveness of spontaneity and intuition. Just to add a little bit of commentary here, I just wanted to explain what it is that you are seeing on screen. As I was testing this makeup, so it's seeing if it would react to my skin, I originally had this idea of putting like insert shots in of like materials, mainly materials I was using for the Foley for the film. One of them being blue tack. I wanted to make this like stretching noise, and I wanted to do these shots of the materials, and I was literally just testing here like blue tack and seeing what it'd look like with like red paint and red dye on it, and as I was doing it, and I'd already had a bit of this like blood on my arm to test it out, I was like, what will it look like if I just stick this on my arm? And it really does reinforce this idea of I'm just trying things out. I didn't have the plan to do that and be like, okay, I want to create this effect. and it did actually just evolve that idea that happens in the film where the character, where he like kind of peels his skin off. I just thought it was really interesting in that it reinforced my whole research of, just trying things out, and where your ideas come from. It's just intuition that's kind of just within you. Working with Danny Horen's car and cinematography, I was able to work things out in the moment and bounce ideas off him to figure out how to create the feel I wanted. We worked closely on set, and it flowed as we followed my intuition, creating the sense of play on set. I would argue the shows within the film too, as well as pulling from not only my ideas, but also my experiences of dealing with my skin health daily. Therefore, putting myself in the role of actor in this film taught me a lot about intuition and feeling and how I direct myself in performance, and how I would take this forward in directing others. Pulling from my own struggles of eczema, I know exactly how this character felt and was able to tap into that so easily by attaching myself personally. All this combined creates a very self-reflexive film, by learning from trusting my personal ideas in the screenplay block, the potential of directing on intuition and making missed moments, and being organised in advance to allow the creativity to come through. Therefore, I'm not hiding behind anything in this film, as I am blatantly stating, this is how I feel of my skin and how it feeds into my anxiety. Is this the key to achieving an authentic creative voice? The director-actor combination is a long-standing tradition in cinema, where filmmakers combine themselves physically with their own personal stories to tell them more effectively. However, I would argue this does not always have to be the case. The films such as Spielberg's The Fabelmans, projecting his own young life onto a cast of actors to bring his memories to life effectively. Yet in something like Eva Victor's Sorry Baby, it becomes hard to imagine it not being written by, directed and starred by the same person, as you simply would not get the same authentic feel. It's a complicated question, and maybe a film like mine, being of an experimental nature, isn't the right example to prove an answer to it. An Itch to Scratch bears more of a feeling found in a Cronenberg or Lynch film, as they were two big inspirations for me artistically, whilst also bearing comparisons of films such as The Big Shave, Conspirators of Pleasures, or even the work of Olivier de Sagazan, with all these examples having this common through line of creating an effective atmosphere of uncomfortableness, which is achieved by these filmmakers, including myself, surrendering themselves to their ideas. All I will say is the feeling I had in my head is the same one I took onto set, and it's the same one audiences felt when watching my film, which speaks volumes to the intuitive directing approach that I can put into words. The power of intuition and direction truly unlocks something we can't put our finger on. It's the ineffable third meaning, as Barves argues, where the feeling is something that is conjured through symbols and significance, yet the feeling from the director's intuition creates a filmic, obtuse language that transcends meaning and brings interpretations. As a film, it can only be located after having analytically gone across the essential, the depth, and the complexity of the cinematic work, all those riches which are merely those of articulated language, with which we constitute the work and believe we exhaust it, which can be applied to the films I've mentioned, but also the process of how intuition unlocks something that artists hold within them, and it's the expression of intuition that forms that creative voice.
Right. And gets a thing that cinema can do, saying abstractions. So those things they're kind of like the same feeling we have when we have a powerful dream. It's very difficult to tell your friend that dream with words, right, so that they get the same experience. It's next door to impossible. But cinema can say these things that we feel, think, as we experience, and we have intuition, and we can get a thing there that's said with the language of cinema. So beautiful.
Right.
And we may not be able to say those things in words, but we know far more than we give ourselves credit for, because the experience is that you go out after a film and you have some coffee, or you have some red wine, and you begin to talk, and someone says something, you say, no, that's not the way I see it, like this, right, and all these things come out. So we know a lot of things, and we are like detectives, and we like to feel a thing and make sense of it and find a thing, just like in life.
Finally, I feel that so far in the MA course I've taken a big step into understanding my creative voice a lot more. I've learned I can use my intuition to help work out what it is I need to create a film that elevates my own vision to something palpable, From working on films that both were and weren't my own ideas, it has shown me how I would incorporate these different avenues of exploring intuition into my process of directing. The different stages of the course so far have helped me trust my creative voice more. Firstly, with the writing block, exploring where ideas come from and to allow interesting things to be explored from ourselves as individuals freely. Making Miss Moments of a Cruise showed me the balance that needs to be had when leading a film, especially on a student level. I now know I must balance my approach whilst figuring out in advance what it is I need to achieve clearly. Intuition when working with other people is needed to follow one direct path, yet this approach changes when talking to different roles. For example, the language used by my cinematographer should be different to the language used by my actor, as I need to communicate on different levels of intuition. It was helpful to experience these two different types of intuition before I made an itch to scratch on the innovative block. But I learned the balance to trust my own initial ideas as well as what I needed on set to achieve that vision. A balance between intuition and preparation, putting myself into every role by a cinematographer on the film, helped further my understanding of the intuition I need to communicate when working with others and directing actors in the future. This understanding is valuable and something I will take forward with me on my future projects. It'll be interesting to see especially how this process will help me on a scripted fiction film as I continue to grow. However, I feel like I've grown as a filmmaker by trusting that inner intuition and creative voice a bit more, regardless.